It's time for a reality check.
We're here to deconstruct health and fitness trends and provide tangible advice so you can become 1% better with each choice starting today. Welcome back to Reality Check. We are your hosts, Jess and Jill, and today we want to talk about probably one of the biggest frustrations that we hear from individuals that come to us seeking help. But this episode is why you're consistent and you're still not seeing results. So there are a lot of different scenarios or umbrellas that come off of this. But if just being consistent was all you needed to do, we would all be healthy and happy and lean and thriving. And consistency isn't enough, quite frankly. We have to do enough of the right things. You could be consistent with a plan that is absolutely terrible for you. It's funny, I talk to clients who come to us who I tell them you're consistent to a fault, where they're like, oh, I've been following this 800 calorie meal plan that so-and-so from the gym gave me, and it's only 6 foods and I'm not losing weight and I feel terrible and I'm exhausted and I binge every 6 days. And it's like, you're aiming to stick to something that's not even realistic for any human or your life. And you're consistent to a fault, right? So.
And we did do one other episode. I want to kind of like throw this in there. We did another episode called like, I'm doing all the right things and nothing's working. This really is for that group who is consistent as heck, right? I say that to say there's a lot of people who think they're consistent. And then once we actually start tracking, they're hardcore and then they fall off. And then they're hardcore and then they fall off, right? The people who are actually consistent, but feeling like, what the heck, nothing ever makes an impact. We want to talk to you guys today, right? The people who were like, man, if everybody put in your effort to actually follow the right things, man, the results that they could see, right? So kudos to you, first of all, for being consistent. Now let's talk about the different levers that we like to mess with to help your body adapt, because at some point your body adapts to the inputs that you give it. If you keep giving it the same inputs, it will hit a plateau. And the only way to overcome that plateau is to change some of these different scenarios or factors, I guess, that we're going to talk about. So again, kudos to you for being consistent, because that really is important. Now let's talk about the nuances within that.
Yeah, I mean, there could be, and we'll talk about this, there could be a literal like biological issue that's happening underlying that is stalling or plateauing or making things difficult. But a lot of times we're just doing too much of the wrong things for our body, or we're not taking into consideration, like Jess said, the adaptations that come into play. And you're like, oh, I've been doing X, Y, and Z for the last 5 years. And it's like, oh my gosh, like props to you, like Jess said, but like, I'll be damned if I do the same thing for 5 years and
nothing
I get absolutely nothing out of it. Like there's women that come to me that are like, I've been working with this person for this functional doctor for 2 years and I still don't feel good. I'm like, why are you still working with them? What do you mean?
Or the person, I will say this to the good practitioners out there, may be avoiding the work that they don't want to do, right? I fall in this category. I am very open about my sleep and my stress being my problem. I work with women like that all the time, where they're willing to work out hard. They're willing to eat more protein or go through a deficit and eat less calories. But when I tell them, dude, if you don't cut back on work and go to sleep, your body is fighting you. And they're not willing to do that one thing, right? So like all of these things we're going to talk about are very important. Each person requires a different input. There's some women like that where I'm like, dude, you got to do less. There's other women where it's like, please get off the couch and do something, right? So you are an individual, and we need to find what those levers are that, or I don't know, dials are that need turned for you, because what you need is likely different than what somebody else needs. And are you willing to do the hard thing? Because sometimes you might not be willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And
you got to be honest with yourself.
And again, that's why I love coaching, is because we kind of audit for this person and see like, all right, these are the levers we could pull. Then we figure out, is that something the client is willing to do and able to do? And then we decide, all right, what are our big rocks to move?
And what are our expectations now? Based on what you tell me you're willing to do, if you're not willing to pull back at work and sleep more, but you won't give up your 6 times a week workouts, okay, I will help you optimize those workouts that we're doing, but I am not promising the same outcomes because your body's not getting the recovery it needs, right? So my job as a coach now is to set realistic expectations based on the inputs that you are willing and able to do. For some people, it's like, hey, if you're only able to get to the gym 1 time a week, cool. Is that optimal? No, but if that's what you're willing to do, we're going to start there, right? So, okay, that's my tangent for this. Now let's get back to our notes.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, obviously there's a lot of frustration that comes with that, right? Where people are like, my gosh, I'm doing all of these things. I'm working so hard and nothing happens. I think one of the things, the nuances that comes with that is generally women are coming to us saying, I want this change with my physique. I want to lose X pounds. I want to build muscle. I want to do whatever. I want to lose body fat. Sometimes, and we are obviously so conditioned from diet culture and the industry and GLP-1, all these carrots that are dangled, right? Even if the things that you are relentlessly consistent with aren't getting you the outcome that you desire, still sometimes women find themselves in a place where they are afraid to make a change. They're afraid to eat more food, even though they've heard a million times that'll benefit them. There's two things to that. One, you are clinging to something that is not serving you, right? So like, what's the alternative at that point? Like, there's no point in going down that path again and again and again and again. The other thing is you're now adding a stressor because you are so consumed with what do I eat? What do I not eat? What do I do? What do I not do? What's the right thing? What's the wrong thing? That you give yourself this analysis paralysis and you're afraid to change something. So you're like, all right, as long as I had a woman who started with us recently, and she's going to absolutely blow you guys away. I just know it. But she was like, I have this number I refuse to go over. Like, I can't go over it. And I said, well, let's talk about that before you come into the program, because you're telling me you don't want to gain more than 3 pounds on the scale, but metabolically, you're not in a healthy place. You've been dieting for a long time. You've been using external weight loss support. I said the scale might exceed that number, and I want us to detach from that now before you come in, and I want to set this expectation very clearly of what this timeline is going to look like, and that the scale probably will tip over that. But here's why. And as soon as I did that, you could almost like see her like relax, like, oh my gosh, like she's been clinging so desperately to, I can't go over this number. And I'm like, look, I told her, I'm like, look at this new baseline you've set for yourself. I feel like shit. I can't sleep. My digestion is horrible. I lost all this weight and I keep regaining it back. I'm miserable. I'm tired of dieting. But you are continuing to restrict because you can't exceed this one number. Like, who cares if you're getting healthier and the other side is so much better than what you're holding on to? But you've now set the bar so low for yourself, is my point. So there's this emotional aspect too, that I think outside help can be extremely beneficial, because just that conversation with her, she's like, oh my gosh, you're telling me to do the opposite of everything I have in my head, and it completely makes sense. And I can't believe for these last 3 years, I've been doing the same thing over and over and over and acting like something different is going to happen. So the emotional cost with that is huge. And I want to make sure that auditing yourself is important, knowing what your inputs are, what they're actually getting you. Like Jess said, having the right expectation. But you can't just diet endlessly and do the same workouts and nothing changes all these years, and then you think one day it's just going to click. It doesn't work that way.
And we set these expectations with every single person before they hire us. However, I can think offhand of like at least a handful of clients who they come in, we have these conversations, they say, yeah, I'm ready to do all that. And then it's almost like they expect us just to be their accountability buddy to do the same shit they've always done that hasn't worked. And they're like, no, I'm just going to do my workouts and I'm just going to do. And it's like, if you do it your way, why are you even hiring me as a professional? Because this is actually opposite of what I might recommend. And again, for every person, it's not eat more food. Some people it's, okay, you eat plenty of calories. We need to get more colors and more nutrients, right? Every single person is different. However, hiring us to just hold your hand while you do the same ineffective stuff, like, I'm not proud for you to go tell people you're my coach, quite frankly. Like, you're not doing my program. You're doing your program while I'm
paying
here
me to tell me about it.
while I'm here setting expectations like, okay, well, if I was going to tweak it, here's what I might do. But I do think a lot of people want that like self-validation to just be like, yeah, okay. And a lot of times, again, I think they are well-intentioned. I think they don't know what they don't know. You don't really, even if logically you hear it and you understand it, you don't believe it inherently until you see it work on your own body, I think. So I think there's definitely a level of blind trust coming in and doing a muscle building phase for the first time ever. There's a level of blind trust. And then at the other side of it, you start to see like, oh, wow, I can't believe how much better I feel. But yeah, I think that there is that. And sometimes it's very well intentioned because it's just, well, it worked for me before. And then my question is, okay, but did you keep the weight off? Well, no, then I stopped working out for a while and this and that. And it's like, okay, then it didn't work, right? So that's always going to be my question. Are you able to stick to it for the rest of your life? Okay, then it's not working, right? You should be able to keep it off and not need us anymore. Our goal is to have clients graduate from working with us and never need us again. It is not to have to hold your hand and cheerlead you through a motivated season. At the end of every motivated season is burnout. Okay. We need to create systems and habits and adaptation so that your body works for you again. That truly is the core of what we do in our coaching.
Mm-hmm. And then the other piece of this with consistency is that, like a common scenario I see is people who say, well, I work out consistently. I'm like, cool. What does nutrition look like? Which obviously, if you're listening to this, especially if you listen to the last episode, just working out and checking the box certainly is not enough for results. So I always know that there's room for opportunity in that area when women come to us, which is fine. But then let's say we move to nutrition. I'm like, all right, what does that look like? Do you track your calories? Well, no, I just try to make sure I get enough protein and I eat pretty healthy. And I'm like, all right, so now as we're digging, I realize that like in your head, you might be thinking I'm dieting, or you might be mindful, which is great. But for the sake of improving your hormones, improving your gut health, changing your physique, getting healthier, a lot of times we need more than just I'm trying to do this thing.
There's no data.
Yeah.
There's no data baseline for us to then build off of. Like we said earlier in this episode, your body adapts to the inputs that you give it. If you don't even know what that starting line is, how are you going to adapt it?
How do you know what to change?
No wonder you're at a plateau. So Jill just named a couple things, but those are just a couple, right? Food and exercise are pretty big ones. A lot of people who, again, think they're doing all the right things could use optimization in those two areas. Then we also have like recovery consistency. Again, this is a huge population of who we work with are people who have always exercised and thought they were eating well, but they're grinding their nervous systems into the ground and they're not sleeping enough and they're staring at screens late at night and they're overtraining. So their body doesn't recover from said training sessions. Their cortisol's through the roof, right? So all of these things, how many steps you get in a day, right? I have some women who have come to me walking 15,000 steps a day. Guess what? There's nowhere to go from there. What am I going to do? Have you walk 20,000 steps, 25,000 steps a day, right? So adaptation, we want to adapt all of these different levers strategically. When I am increasing somebody's food like that, when I have them in a muscle building phase, I actually may decrease their steps. That sounds wild, right? Movement is healthy. Movement is good. I'm doing that strategically because if I can get them adapted to lower steps, then when we go into a deficit someday, I can crank those steps back up and boom, more caloric output without having to cut calories as low. So again, every single factor that we look at is strategic. It is not, I think I eat pretty well, right? If you want to change physique or metabolically.
Yeah. And then again, there is like false consistency where, and we see this with people coming into our program too, just tracking your food. I love that you are gaining awareness around your nutrition, but if you're not hitting a target, like there are clients who check in and they're like, oh, I tracked. And I'm like, okay, that's like step one, but like your protein was all over the place. Your calories are still 1,200 this day, 2,800 this day, 1,700 this day. You're tracking it, and that's great that we have awareness and data to work with, but you're doing the same thing that you were doing prior to working with me. Now you're just logging it. So like we're moving.
We're still not changing the stimulus.
Yeah, you have to change the adaptation. Again, awareness is step one. Same with like what I said about workouts. Like consistent workouts doesn't mean that they're effective workouts. That means you're checking a box, you're burning calories, whatever. But again, it's not necessarily the approach to actually drive the change that you want. So again, you're kind of being consistent in ineffective ways, really. You're being consistent with the wrong inputs for your body. So that's the other component with that. And then why does the body actually stop responding? I mean, obviously there is a plethora of reasons. Jess talked about recovery, which is, I think, a big one. Really, there are two camps. There are obviously women who genuinely work out so consistently, sometimes too much, and they are lacking recovery. the other camp is that you just don't move enough, or you're not moving effectively.
Or not training effectively.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of women who are like former competitors or rigorous exercisers who exercise 6 days a week, high intensity, heart rate up all the time. And they are shaken when I first tell them we're going to dial back lifting to maybe 4 days a week. If you have to do a 5th day or 6th day, do like slow yoga. And they're like, I can't not train 6 days a week. And their physique starts changing in a positive direction, and they're blown away. But it's just because we're not doing less overall volume. We're just being smarter with our programming, so that they can actually recover too. But I always tell people, like, your body is going to give us information on what it's adapted to, right? So like if somebody comes to us and they were eating genuinely 1,400 calories a day for years, and then we bring them through a reverse diet or a muscle building phase, we get them up to 2,200 calories for a few months. And they're like, okay, I'm ready. I want to go into a deficit. And we try to cut down to 1,800 calories and they don't lose weight. Guess what? It's not a deficit. If you're not losing weight, right? Your body is giving us feedback as we see the data happening. Our job is to educate you on, okay, this is what this means. Now we have a choice. Do you want to cut lower to go into that deficit? Is that realistic for you, right? Or do you want to spend more time at high calories to try to adapt your body higher, longer, right? So again, the plateaus are not some sort of failure. It's a natural adaptation. Every time you give your body a stimulus, your body ought to adapt, which is great. It's healthy. And then at some point that adaptation becomes the new norm. And that's when a plateau happens. It's your body giving you feedback on what it's adapted to so that we can then strategically manipulate other factors.
Mm-hmm. And then obviously we take a functional health, whole person approach. So there are hormonal issues, gut issues. If you have like a ton of inflammation internally, and the odds are just not in our favor, right? I think it's important. I think people hear hormones and it's just like, oh, I just don't burn fat because my hormones are air quote off. When you have a hormone imbalance of any kind, gut dysfunction, whatever the case is, not generally speaking, what is happening literally in every scenario is things in your lifestyle have driven you to this point of internal dysfunction. In return, you don't feel good. It's probably harder to execute your protocols. Things where you do prioritize your health take a back seat. So there's these behavioral things that happen in response to obviously not feeling good, right? You're going to be more inclined to work out consistently, lift heavier, do all those things when you have more energy and you're sleeping better and recovering better, right? So if those things aren't in place, you're literally not going to be able to execute as effectively. But there are scenarios where you do have metabolic downregulation, right? Where just the act of creating a calorie deficit is more difficult. So there are different things that happen in response to that. But ultimately, it's important to know that things in your lifestyle are driving that dysfunction. The most common being chronic underfueling, right?
Or undernourishing. Even if you're overeating calories, underconsuming the appropriate types of nutrients.
To actually fuel your body effectively. And then lack of recovery, meaning you're not sleeping well, you're not managing your stress effectively. So these things in your life, which is why looking at the whole picture is super important. Those things are what drive the dysfunction. And then the dysfunction in turn makes it more difficult for you to see the physical results that you want. So that's the actual
under muscling
thing that can happen. Yes.
I would say lack of sleep, not having enough muscle, and then undernourishing. Those three things are the most important things. Again, when Jill says that sometimes we do have those cases where we get there and we're like, oh, she did a really good muscle building phase. That is like 5 out of 100 clients where we get to that point and we're really like, oh, shoot, okay, there is really an underlying thing that has to be. And again, sometimes we can also address the underlying things while we're doing the baseline stuff. But for so many people, we do the basics and their symptoms start to go away most of the time. Every now and then we have somebody where it's like, oh, wow, there was a mold overgrowth at work, or this person had Lyme disease, or this, right? That's so uncommon that's the root cause of your weight. I'll put in air quotes, weight loss resistance. You can still lose weight. We just need to figure out what your caloric deficit looks like. And if your body is not adapted at a high enough calorie, it's just probably miserable being at such low calories because you've never spent time higher and you're probably just inconsistent. Again, for I would say 95 out of 100 clients, that's the case, is that you're just not turning these levers in the right way. Okay. The three biggest mistakes, I guess we kind of talked about that. I guess also like using willpower instead of systems. I think that's a big thing when people think they're really consistent. It's like they think they need to like pull up their bootstraps and muscle through it to get more willpower, to get more motivation. I do not trust my future self because that chick makes terrible decisions, right? I need to create systems so that I lift 3 days a week. I need to have it put on my calendar as if it's a meeting with myself, or else I will get busy with work and not find time, right? I choose to put, if my husband buys Pop-Tarts or snacks that I would tend to not keep in our house, I choose to put them on the top shelf in our pantry because I'm 5 feet tall. I open the pantry and I don't see them right at my eye level, right? There are things we can do to make our environment serve our goals and do that stuff rather than thinking you need to willpower it better. Not our differentiator, but like a good coach is going to help give you tools to overcome your specific roadblock. They're not there to just be your cheerleader to help you through a season of motivation, because again, at some point that motivation fades and then you crash out. That coach is going to get really great before and afters for 3 or 6 months of you being hardcore. But how are you going to maintain that result if all you're expected to do is just work harder? We all have the same 24 hours in the day. Like, that's not our motto. Our motto is to create systems so that your habits actually change, so it becomes part of your life.
Okay, so how do you actually adjust, pivot, overcome this I'm being consistent and not seeing results? So just kind of touched on this, or we hit it when we were talking about the false consistency, really, is that data is first. We as coaches specifically always drive clients back to the data, because there's even scenarios where mentally client is spiraling because maybe they made a choice that was, in air quotes, off plan, which I want to be clear that that's like not a thing, but in their head, that's how they feel. Or that they ate a food that was less nutritious, and they've always associated that with like a binge episode or a YOLO moment where all bad things happen and they physically feel bad and the scale goes up and they hate themselves, right? They associate anything like that with that scenario. So they might have everything dialed in great and they lifted heavy and they checked all these boxes for the week. And if you look at their biofeedback, they're like saying their energy's better, their sleep quality's better, their hunger cues are in check. But they have this one, like, again, air quotes, moment of weakness where they're spiraling. And I'm like, hey, dude, look at this week. Look at all of these improvements in your biofeedback. Your inches are all good. You didn't even gain weight this week. Your inches are still trending downward. You said you lifted so heavy this week and you got all these PRs. And they're like, oh, they're fine, right?
And then it starts to slowly unwind this fear of food, yes, fear of bread, fear of the scale changing because they see their inches are the same, right? Oh, my clothes fit the same even though I'm 5 pounds heavier. What is that? That's muscle. That's actually healthy, right? So it takes time looking at the data, but having an objective person help with that is really super helpful in that process.
So any data is good, whether you are working with somebody or not. You have to have data, because if there is a blip or your cycle started or you're inflamed from lifting heavier, right? You might look at the scale and historically freak out and be like, oh my God, this plan isn't working. I have to stop immediately. But if you look at the data and say, okay, my inputs were really consistent this week. I was right on target, but these are the variables at play. Now we've removed emotion from the equation. So there are 8 billion scenarios we could obviously give you with that, but that's the point, is that you remove emotion from the equation when you're making decisions on how you approach your health and your physique change that you're looking for.
And then how we're using that data, we're looking at patterns. We're not looking at one isolated week where you felt bloated because you were PMSing and you had a ton of sodium last night. Like, that's ridiculous, right? We're looking at patterns over time and trends over time so that we can adjust those specific dials that we talked about. And we can recap, maybe at the end of this episode, we'll recap the specific dials that we tend to change most often. Yeah. But looking at patterns, and are you consistent? Because again, if you say, oh, nothing's working, and then I look at your data and I'm like, well, you didn't even hit our targets for the last 2 weeks. So that doesn't mean you're I'm not changing your targets. Hit the targets and then let's see if it works. Then we'll talk about it, but I'm not changing your targets. So 1, you have to be consistent. And then 2, we're looking at patterns over time. If truly your behaviors are consistent and you have plateaued now for 3 weeks in a row, okay, that is a cause for me to now change these dials.
Yeah, but we're looking at that and saying, we didn't actually hit the plan that was set forth for you. So do we need to change something because you're unable to hit it and reset expectations? Or do you just need to hit the plan and then
again, and if
see
you
how your
need
body
tools,
responds? Yeah.
if you need tools on how to do it because you're having these struggles, like that's where we come in to give you specific behavior change, like ideas or how to change your environment, those sorts of things. But again, at the end of the day, you have to change something to see change. And then also just like using recovery as a lever, not as a reward. Like recovery is actually part of muscle building and body fat loss and hormone health and gut health and nervous system regulation. It is not a, oh, I worked out so hard, so now I get a rest day. It's like, no, it should be part of the plan.
And Jess kind of talked about this, but like what triggers an adjustment is actual consistency to a structured plan laid out that was intentional. And then when there's a true plateau to that, you don't make what I think this trap that a lot of people fall into, especially women, is they get so emotional, right? So now we're doing emotion over data. And they constantly change their approach. Well, my body didn't respond to this, so I have to try this. Well, I can only do keto because my body's sensitive to carbs. And it's like, okay, correlation is not causation here, right? So we have to look at what actually are you sticking to and executing, and not constantly changing the plan, because then you never have enough data to make an intentional, controlled response to that and make a decision that gives you a predictable adaptation, right? So a true plateau. And when we say a true plateau, it depends on the scenario. And, we work with clients for months and months and months, or sometimes several years. And it's important to know what phase you're in. What is the intention behind that phase? If you've been dieting on and off for the last 10 years, you might need to take a break and eat some food and live your life and get your relationship with food in place, and eat more protein and nourish your body, right? And regulate a little bit, and then go back in later. So it depends what phase you're in, but ultimately consistency needs to be more than a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I'm talking like a good 2 months of being consistent. Now, if you're my client and we're in a fat loss phase, I'm not saying, oh, be consistent on this deficit for 2 months before I make a change, right? Because having a coach can speed up that process, because we do have all of this data and decision-making power at our fingertips through the coaching process. But you have to be consistent more than like 2 weeks, more than 5 days, to say, this diet doesn't work, my body's not responding, my metabolism is broken, my hormones are off, blah, 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 whatever it is.
And you have to be well versed at what even to look for. Again, if you're consistent with everything, but then you had alcohol 2 days before your weigh-in, I know as your coach, I'm looking through your food log and I'm like, oh, well, that's why her weight's up. That has nothing to do with our calories. That's going to drop back down in 2 days, right? But I know to look for that as your coach. A lot of times, again, women get this panic because they see the scale go up and then they cut their calories more. You're really not optimizing your time. You're going to end up back in the yo-yo diet thing. Okay, so which dials to turn? I think we should just like kind of wrap up with this. We talked about this, and there are many more than just these 4, but these are the 4 really big ones that we find most effective, and we kind of start each person with. First and foremost is protein and calories. Again, we can't turn any dials without data. So first, we're getting a couple weeks of baseline data from every single person before even giving recommendations. First, we're giving a protein goal. Most women, most people are under consuming protein and over consuming calories, or maybe some variation. Maybe they're under consuming calories 4 days a week, and then they don't know how much they're going over on weekends, right? So first, we're getting a baseline. Then we're monitoring protein and calories. This does not just mean lowering calories. Like we've talked about, a lot of times we're actually bringing women through muscle building phases. We are strategically increasing their calories, and it's very effective because their bodies are adapted at low calories. Second, progressively overloading effective lifts, not just checking the boxes and going through, yep, I'm consistent with exercise. Third, steps. Fourth, recovery, anything sleep and circadian rhythm, sleep quality, right? Those are the big 4, I would say. Protein and calories in terms of food, progressively overloading, steps, and then recovery are the dials that are most easily changed, because most people are not consistent with all 4 of those things.
Mm-hmm. And then when you are consistent with those things for several weeks, at that point, if you're still not seeing what you want, then you say, okay, am I fueling my body enough for what I want it to do? Is my training and my programming effective enough for what I want? Am I giving myself enough recovery based on all of the output that I'm generating, right? Your day-to-day stressors, your workouts, your steps, your whatever. I hear all the time where women are like, oh, I lift 5 days a week and I hit 10K steps and I'm not losing and I eat my protein. I'm like, what are your calories? 1,300. How long have you been at that? 6 months. Okay. How much have you lost since then? 0. All right.
Why are you doing that then?
You're not giving your body enough food for what you're asking it to do, right? What you're demanding of it. And then again, are you adjusting intentionally and based on data or based on emotion? Or in the nicest way possible, lack of logic, right? Because a lot of times there aren't logical adjustments happening. You're just reacting, and you want to be mindful. Or are you not adjusting anything and expecting something different to happen? So, having some type of audit with yourself on a regular basis, generally weekly, which is typically what we're doing with clients, is so important to really check yourself. So often we think we need more intensity, more dieting, more restriction, more all of these things, when most of the time we need to like loosen the reins a little bit.
Be more consistent with the important stuff, right? And
Yeah.
then again, once you're consistent, now we can adjust the appropriate dials because you're likely adjusting the wrong one.
Yeah, we need
The
better
move more,
workouts,
eat less
better recovery,
is outdated.
better nutrients, better fueling, more consistent fueling, whatever. So that's most of the time is that there's, again, really two camps that we're speaking to here, where it's like false consistency and you think you're being consistent mentally because in your head you're like, well, I'm doing these things, but you're not as consistent as you think you are, or you're consistent to a fault where you're too consistent with the things that don't serve the outcome that you're looking for. So those are really the two camps that we're speaking to in this episode. That I think is important to understand. And yes, there could be biological underlying issues that need to be addressed first. But again, you can't keep dieting and restricting and expecting something different to happen. So if you feel like you're being consistent and still not seeing results, I hope this episode gave you some clarity on why that might be the case and what kind of things you can change so that you don't feel like you're working hard and not getting anything out of it. So that is all for today's episode, and we'll see you guys next time.